There is a video on the internet that the Western automotive press still hasn't fully reckoned with. It was filmed in Beijing in late April 2025, and the journalist who shot it was the sole Western reporter invited to a technical demonstration held by BYD. His name is Tim Leissner, and he writes for Inside EVs. In the video, a BYD Han-L sedan, a production car, not a prototype, not a concept, not a closed-course demonstration vehicle, pulls up to a charging station. 2 charging cables are plugged in simultaneously, one to each of the car's 2 DC fast charging ports. Within 10 seconds of connection, the dashboard display shows a charging rate of 1,002 kilowatts, 1 megawatt. In 12 seconds of charging, the car adds approximately 20 kilometers of range. In the 5 minutes that follow, it goes from a state of charge of around 10% to around 62% and adds 400 kilometers of driving range. Leissner, who had arrived at the demonstration with the professional skepticism of a journalist who covers electric vehicle charging for a living, wrote the following sentence in his published account: "I can confirm that 5-minute fast charging is very real." That sentence, published on May 7, 2025, is the most important sentence written about electric vehicles in the last decade. Not because 5-minute charging is flawlessly available on every street corner. It isn't, and Leissner's own article says so plainly, but because it confirmed, with the first-hand verification of a Western journalist standing in front of a production car connected to a production charger in a real city, that the specific thing the entire Western automotive industry had been treating as a future milestone, charging an electric vehicle as quickly as filling a petrol tank, had already been done. In China, with a car that launched in April 2025 at a starting price of 219,800 yuan, which at the time of launch converted to approximately 29,810, not a prototype, not a limited production run, not a halo vehicle for which you'd wait 2 years and pay a 6-figure premium. A production car, available today, in the country where BYD sells it. By the time you finish watching this video, you are going to understand exactly what BYD built and what the precise engineering decisions were that made it work, why the Tesla Model Y, the best-selling electric vehicle in the Western world, takes approximately 36 minutes to charge from 10 to 80%, while BYD's production car does it in 6. What Tesla's own engineers have said about whether the Model Y can ever close that gap on its current hardware architecture, and what the practical consequences are for a driver who experiences both of these cars back-to-back at a charging station. The answer to that last question is the one that determines everything about where the electric vehicle market goes next, and it is the one that the Western automotive press keeps treating as a future problem, while BYD is treating it as a solved one. Stay with me, because the distance between those two framings is the entire story. Let's begin with the exact engineering of what BYD built on March 17, 2025, when it unveiled the Super E platform at a launch event, streamed from its Shenzhen headquarters, because the technical decisions are not complicated once you understand the specific problem they were solving. The problem with fast charging an electric vehicle has never been, at its most fundamental level, a question of how much power a charger can output. The problem has always been heat. When you push electrical current through a battery at very high rates, the resistance inside the cells generates heat. And sustained heat is the primary mechanism through which lithium battery cells degrade permanently over time. This is why every fast charging system ever built before BYD's Super E platform tapers its output significantly as the battery fills. The charger protects the cells from the heat that high-rate sustained charging would cause. It is also why the 250 kilowatt peak charging rate advertised on a Tesla Model Y is a number that every experienced EV owner quickly learns to treat with skepticism. That 250 kilowatts exists. It is real. It appears for approximately the first 30 seconds of a charging session when the battery is very nearly empty and the cell temperature is optimal. After those 30 seconds, the charging rate begins to fall, and it falls continuously and steeply for the rest of the session. EVKX's independently measured charging curve data for the Tesla Model Y long range shows an average charging rate of approximately 95. 6 kilowatts between 10 and 80% state of charge, reached over a charging time of 36 minutes and 2 seconds. That is not a criticism of the car. It is a description of how lithium-ion battery chemistry behaves under the physics of the situation. And it is exactly the physics that BYD set out to change. BYD's solution to the heat problem was not a single innovation. It was a simultaneous redesign of every component in the charging system at once, which is why the announcement in March 2025 landed with the force that it did among the engineers who understood what it meant. The first change was to the battery cells themselves. BYD's flash charging battery, a redesigned version of its Blade LFP pack, was built with extensively reworked electrolytes, separators, and electrodes that reduce internal resistance by a claimed 50% relative to the previous generation, according to BYD's official technical documentation, confirmed in Inside EV's independent hands-on review. Lower internal resistance means less heat generated per unit of current passing through the cell, which means the battery can sustain a dramatically higher charging rate before the thermal management system is overwhelmed. BYD's own internal testing data shows that the flash charging battery maintained 600 kilowatts of charging power at 90% state of charge, a level of sustained high-power charging at high state of charge that no previous production battery in the world had demonstrated. The Han L charges from 0 to 100% in 20 minutes. The Tang L charges from 10 to 70% in 6 minutes. The second change was to the voltage architecture of the entire system. The Super E platform operates at 1,000 volts, the first mass-produced passenger vehicle platform to do so. BYD's previous high-performance vehicles operated at 800 volts, which was itself considered a significant step beyond the 400-volt architecture used by Tesla's entire Model 3 and Model Y lineup. The step from 800 volts to 1,000 volts required BYD to develop a new generation of silicon carbide power chips rated for up to 2,500 volts, the highest voltage rating of any mass-produced automotive-grade SiC chips ever announced, according to BYD's own documentation. These chips handle the power conversion between the vehicle's battery and its motor, and building them to 1,500 volt tolerance was necessary because a 1,000 volt architecture under load conditions requires headroom that lower-rated chips cannot safely provide. BYD designed and manufactured these chips internally rather than sourcing them from a third party, which is significant because it means the entire chain from battery cell to power chip to motor is under BYD's own engineering control, the kind of vertical integration that Elon Musk spent 5 years at Battery Day promising Tesla would achieve. The third change was to the charging hardware itself. BYD's Megawatt flash charger is a fully liquid-cooled terminal with a maximum output capacity of 1,360 kilowatts, higher than the 1,000 kilowatts that the Han L's battery management system caps its acceptance at, meaning the charger is not the limiting factor in the system. The charger uses 2 simultaneous DC charging plugs to handle the full 1,000 kilowatt output, because a single charging connector built to current Chinese GBT standards cannot safely handle 1,000 amps at 1,000 volts. Using 2 plugs simultaneously is the engineering workaround for this connector standard limitation, and it is a deliberate choice rather than a sign of technical incompleteness. It allows deployment today using proven connector technology without waiting for new standards to be written, tested, adopted, and manufactured at scale. The first 500 megawatt flash charging stations were operational in early April 2025, within 3 weeks of the platform announcement, coinciding with the Han L and Tang L launch. By March 26, 2025, 9 days after the platform announcement, a BYD executive confirmed that 4,000 units of 1 megawatt flash charging stations were already in deployment. If you have found this specific, technically exact breakdown of what BYD actually built useful, the kind of coverage that goes to the Inside EV's hands-on test report and the EVKX charging curve data, rather than paraphrasing a press release, hit subscribe now. This is what every video on this channel looks like, and the subscribe button means you get the next one when it drops. Now, let's put BYD's numbers directly next to Tesla's, because this is the comparison that the headline promises and the data supports without any exaggeration required. The BYD Han L EV charges from 10 to 62% in 5 minutes on a megawatt flash charger, adding 400 kilometers of CLTC range, verified by Inside EV's direct observation at the Beijing demonstration. It charges from 10 to 70% in 6 minutes according to BYD's official launch documentation published by CNEV Post on April 9, 2025. It charges from 0 to 100% in 20 minutes. Its Han L battery pack holds 83, 2 kilowatt hours of LFP chemistry. The dual motor variant produces 810 kilowatts of combined peak power, reaches 100 kilometers per hour in 7 seconds, and has a documented real-world tested top speed of 305, 5 kilometers per hour. It starts at 219,800 yuan, which at April 2025 exchange rates converted to approximately $29,910. The Tang L EV, a 7-seat SUV on the same platform, carries a 105 kilowatt hour pack, charges from 10 to 70% in 6 minutes, and starts at 229,800 yuan. The Tesla Model Y long range, the specific variant of Tesla's best-selling vehicle that most directly competes with the Han L in terms of price positioning and performance ambition, has a maximum charging rate of 250 kilowatts at its peak, lasting approximately 30 seconds, at the very beginning of a session before beginning its continuous taper. Its average charging rate between 10 and 80% is approximately 95. 6 kilowatts measured independently by EVKX. Its 10 to 80% charging time is 36 minutes and 2 seconds by the same measurement. Its pack capacity in the current generation Juniper variant is approximately 82 kilowatt hours for the US market Panasonic cell version. The Tesla V4 supercharger, which is the fastest public charging hardware Tesla operates, has a maximum output of 500 kilowatts, half of BYD's Megawatt flash charger, but the Model Y itself cannot accept 500 kilowatts. The Model Y's battery architecture is a 400-volt class system. In a 400-volt system accepting 500 kilowatts would require approximately 1,250 amps of current, which is beyond the physical design tolerance of the Model Y's battery and charging hardware. Tesla's own published documentation states that the maximum charging speed for the refreshed Model Y remains 250 kilowatts, unchanged from previous generations. The Tesla Motors Club Technical Discussion Forum contains a thread from February 2025, in which members with detailed knowledge of the V4 supercharger hardware confirm this explicitly. 500 kilowatts on the V4 is achievable with 800-volt vehicles. The Model Y, at 400 volts, is hardware limited to 250 kilowatts, and this will not improve without a new battery architecture. That is the gap, not an estimate, not a projection. A documented, measured, hardware-confirmed gap between 1,000 kilowatts and 250 kilowatts at peak, and between a 6-minute 10 to 70 charge and a 36-minute 10 to 80 charge in practice. The BYD flash charging battery reaches 600 kilowatts at 90% state of charge. The Tesla Model Y reaches approximately 50 kilowatts at 80% state of charge, based on EVKX's published charging curve. At the specific moment when most drivers stop a charging session, 80%, because that is what the navigation system recommends, and because a charge rate slows dramatically beyond it. BYD's car is charging at 12 times the rate of Tesla's car. Not twice as fast, 12 times as fast. Subscribe now, because what I am going to explain in the next section is the specific technical reason why this gap cannot be closed by a software update, a new supercharger version, or any incremental improvement to the Model Y's existing hardware architecture, and why closing it requires a decision at Tesla that the company has not yet publicly made. The reason the gap is not closable with existing hardware is the 400-volt architecture. Every Tesla Model 3 and Model Y ever produced, including the 2025 Juniper refresh, runs on a 400-volt battery architecture. At 400 volts, the maximum current that can practically flow through the car's charging hardware, battery interconnects, and thermal management system without redesigning those components from the ground up limits the practical charging power ceiling to approximately 250 kilowatts for the Model Y. This is not a software constraint. The cells in the Model Y are not physically capable of absorbing current at the rate required to produce 500 kilowatts of charging power through a 400-volt system without generating heat at a rate that would damage them. Moving to 800 volts or 1,000 volts, the architectures that enable the dramatically faster charging speeds demonstrated by BYD, Hyundai's Ioniq 5, Kia's EV6, and Porsche's Taycan requires a completely new battery pack design, new inverter architecture, new motor controller, new onboard charger, and new thermal management system. It is, in engineering terms, a new car, not an upgrade, a new platform. Tesla announced that its next generation platform, the one that will underpin the affordable vehicles and the refreshed Model S and X lineup, will move to an 800-volt architecture. That platform is expected to underpin vehicles arriving from 2026 onward. The current Model Y and the generation sitting in dealerships and driveways right now will not see its charging speed improve materially beyond 250 kilowatts. This is the specific technical context that makes BYD's timing so significant. BYD launched its 1,000-volt flash charging platform in April 2025, with production vehicles and production charging infrastructure simultaneously at a price point that starts below $30,000 in China. Tesla's 800-volt platform, which would still top out at half of BYD's charging power, is arriving on future vehicles on a timeline that hasn't been officially confirmed beyond general guidance for the next generation lineup. The company that is in the market right now, with hardware that exists and infrastructure that is running, is BYD. The company that is describing its path to eventually partially closing the gap is Tesla. That is not a criticism of Tesla's engineering capacity. It is a description of where each company actually stands in April 2025, measured against the standard of a charging session that a driver in Beijing can walk up to, plug in, and complete in the time it takes to buy a coffee. The experience question is the one that matters most for understanding what this gap means commercially. And it is the question that no specification sheet or charging curve graph fully captures. Inside EV's Leisner described it from personal observation, standing at the demonstration station in Beijing, watching a Han L charge from 13% to 25% in approximately 1 minute. He noted that it was the highest charging rate he had ever seen with his own eyes, and he covers EV charging professionally. But beyond the numbers, his account captures something qualitatively different. A charging stop that felt, in terms of its interruption to a journey, like stopping for petrol. Not like waiting for technology to catch up, like a normal stop. Wang Chuanfu, BYD's chairman and president said at the March 17th launch event, the ultimate solution is to make charging as quick as refueling a gasoline car. In the past, refueling took 5 to 8 minutes. Now, for the same range, electric vehicles also take only 5 to 8 minutes. He was describing a threshold that had already been crossed, not one that was being approached. That threshold, from charging as a significant interruption to charging as a normal stop, is the single most important barrier to mass EV adoption that has existed since the first modern electric vehicles arrived in the late 2000s. Surveys of potential EV buyers in the United States, Europe, and Australia have consistently found that charging time and charging availability are the two primary reasons non-EV drivers hesitate to make the switch, ranked above price, above range, and above any other factor in most large-scale studies. BYD has addressed the charging time concern with a production vehicle at an entry price of $29,900. It has addressed the charging availability concern by announcing 4,000 flash charge stations in China from the start, backed by a partnership with Sinopec, China's largest fuel retail network with more than 30,000 locations, which provides a potential site infrastructure for flash chargers wherever petrol stations currently operate. In China, the psychological calculus that has kept millions of potential buyers on the fence has been changed by a piece of existing purchasable, chargeable hardware. Not by a roadmap, not by a battery day, by a production car that Inside EVs verified with its own journalist in Beijing. The honest complication that belongs in this story, and this channel gives you the honest complication every time, is the one that Leistner himself included in his May 7th, 2025 account. He wrote, "Will BYD's charging breakthrough be on every street corner in a few years, the way gas stations are right now? Not exactly. The Megawatt flash charging ecosystem requires both the Han L or Tang L vehicle and a BYD Megawatt flash charger. Without the flash charger, the Han L still charges faster than a Tesla. It can use two simultaneous DC fast charging plugs to combine the output of two standard stations, achieving approximately 500 kilowatts from two 250 kilowatt chargers. But the 5-minute charge specifically requires the dedicated flash charge hardware. And the flash charge network, while deploying rapidly in China and beginning expansion into Germany in June 2026, does not exist in the United States, where BYD vehicles also do not exist, because a 100% import tariff renders them commercially non-viable in the American market. For an American driver making a vehicle purchase decision in mid-2026, the BYD Han L is not an option. The best charging experience available on an affordable vehicle in the American market remains approximately 250 kilowatts at peak, achieved briefly at the start of a session, averaging to something between 95 and 130 kilowatts, depending on the specific vehicle and the specific session conditions, taking between 25 and 37 minutes for a 10 to 80 charge depending on battery size and temperature. That is the market Tesla is competing in. That market does not yet contain BYD's flash charging battery. It does not yet contain any production vehicle with a 1,000-volt architecture. The fastest charging affordable vehicles available in America in 2026 are the Hyundai Ioniq 6 and Kia EV6, which achieve approximately 239 and 233 kilowatts, respectively at peak on their 800-volt architectures, averaging to roughly 175 kilowatts over a 10 to 80 session, significantly faster than the Model Y, but still 3 to 4 times slower than BYD's flash charging system in the hands of a Beijing driver with access to a Megawatt charger. The tariff wall is real protection. But tariff walls are political instruments, and political instruments are subject to negotiation, election, and revision. The 100% tariff on Chinese EVs in the United States was set at that level specifically because a lower tariff would not have been sufficient to prevent BYD and other Chinese manufacturers from undercutting American and European competitors on price and winning market share at a pace that American industrial policy was not prepared to absorb. Canada reduced its tariff from 100% to 1% for up to 49,000 Chinese vehicles in 2026. The European Union set its tariffs at between 7, 8, and 35, 3%, on top of an existing 10% base rate. Those numbers let some Chinese vehicles into the market at a price premium that reduces but does not eliminate their competitive advantage. The American 100% tariff is the highest in any major market and the most protective. It is also, by its nature, a description of how large the underlying competitive gap is. A government does not impose a 100% tariff on a product that is merely somewhat cheaper. It imposes a 100% tariff on a product that is so structurally cost-advantaged that the domestic industry cannot compete with it at any standard tariff rate. Tell me in the comments what you think happens when the tariff wall changes. Whether you think American and European manufacturers will have closed the charging speed gap by the time Chinese EVs are allowed into Western markets at competitive prices, or whether you think the gap will still be large enough to matter. Because that question, not the specification sheet comparison, not the charging curve graph, but the commercial and policy question of when and whether BYD's charging technology reaches the markets where Tesla currently dominates, is the only question whose answer actually determines who wins the next decade of the global electric vehicle market. The technology is not in question anymore. Inside EVs confirmed it in Beijing in April 2025. The question is the timing. And the timing is a policy decision, not an engineering one. If you want to be here when that timing becomes clear, when the next tariff negotiation happens, when BYD's European network expansion reaches the point where flash charging is available on a motorway route that a Western driver actually travels, when Tesla announces the specific vehicle and timeline that will bring its 800-volt architecture to a price point that competes with the Han L. Subscribe now, because every single one of those moments is a step in the most consequential competitive story in the global automotive industry, and we are going to cover every step of it.